Hey everybody, Steph with killersites.com. I want to comment on one thing. First, I had a couple questions with regards to OOP, PHP OOP. The question, there's two parts. Number one, when do you need to create classes? When do you know when you need to use classes in your PHP code? And number two, when do you know if the class was big enough? I think it was. So let me just answer the first question. If you're writing OOP PHP, object-oriented PHP, then you're always using classes. You see, the basis of OOP based systems is in the classes. Classes are the basic building blocks, so you're always using classes. So that's the first question. Second question is how big you should make the classes. Essentially, you should try to make the classes as fine-grained as possible. What do we mean by fine-grained? That means they should be very subject-specific. So, for instance, if you have a class that sends emails, we'll say it's called send mail, and in there you have a bunch of functions and variables and so on that are related to the email or mailing, sending features in your project. So, for instance, maybe you're in your system, not only do you send emails, but maybe you have a internal messaging system. So maybe you have a send the messaging class in your CMS, for instance. Sometimes it's sending email, sometimes it's sending personal messages where you use the database or something to send to other members in the system. So that's what your messaging class would do. And the class should be restricted to those, the code that's required to send out your messages. I would not include in there, for instance, data validating methods. That's where I would create another class. I would probably have another class outside of that. I would call it maybe the validator. And this class would have all kinds of routines in there to validate user input into their forms. So you have a separate class, the validator class, and you have the messenger class. And the messenger class will be using functions from the validator class, but what you do is you would inject this validator class into your messenger class. And there's different ways you can do that. You can do it through inheritance. Your composition is better though. So where you invoke this class inside of your messenger class to do the stuff. Anyway, that's another thing. So yeah, when you're creating classes in PHP or any language, you want to try to keep them specific as possible. They call that fine grain. So you don't want to have a class that has all kinds of things in there. So you might have your messenger class, but you don't want to have functions in there, functionality in there that does something outside of messaging. You know, I don't know. You might have, I don't know, maybe the validating routines. I wouldn't have them in there. I would have a separate validator. Why? Because you know you're going to have validating routines in you're going to need those in other classes potentially. So it's good to just segregate them over into its own particular class. I hope that answers the questions about, the OOP questions that the user had. I'm Steph.